Hi, everyone. This is Jessica from Corp, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Smarter Growth webinar, Creating a Winning Customer Experience. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so should you have any questions during the broadcast, please don't hesitate to type a question into the question box, and I will help you. We are recording today's webinar, so we will post it to our website within 24 hours following this session. And we do hope that today's webinar is interactive, so don't be afraid to ask questions or share your thoughts, and we will include you in our experience. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Corp.U's founder and CEO, Alan Todd.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Welcome, everybody. We have a great show today. So I love the Smarter Growth Series, Leadership Insights Rooted in Management Science. We get to work with people like our guest speaker today, Ralph Cummins, who are obsessed with a single topic, and Ralph's obsession is with customer experience. So I think you're going to have a great use of time for the next 55 minutes or so. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Ralph, for joining us today. And I'm going to introduce Ralph, but I'd like to set the context for what we do and why we do it. And what am I obsessed with? I'm obsessed with leading a learning organization renaissance. So what does that mean? It means helping organizations build a positive learning culture, one that enables people to thrive, to create a workplace where leaders get better, where change happens faster, where teams flourish. And we've been so lucky to be able to work with some of the greatest companies. I know on Fortune's most admired list, 25% of the folks on that top 50 list we get to work with. And Gallup Great Workplaces, those companies, we get to work with them. And in Gartner and supply chain, top-ranked organizations. And these are all organizations that are focused on building a learning culture first to help people thrive first, and then applying that to what you do. And so if you think about that, where does this fit today? We focus on typically three big problems that organizations face. Number one is some type of transformation, or transform the organization, transform the culture, but some big change effort. The second is strengthening the leadership pipeline, so building a bench of leaders. And the third is building a business critical capability, like something that we need to do, for example, to serve customers better or be more customer centric. And so I'm excited about today, because if you look at a lot of what we do has to do with general management, with leadership, and then functional management. And as many of you know, we do a lot of work in supply chain. In fact, many of Gartner's top-ranked supply chain organizations are our partners here at Corp.U, and we have a wonderful partnership with Agilent, and they told their story. They won the Gartner Talent Payback of the Year award and told that story right here on our Smarter Growth series about 2 months ago, which if you ever would like to hear that wonderful story about a wonderful company, you can go to our website, and if you go to the blog, you'll see all of our past webinars. But the reason I tell you that is because in supply chain, our partnership is with Penn State, who most of you know. Again, they've been ranked #1 in supply chain in U.S. News and World Report and Gartner. And we've had this partnership and working with a lot of companies, and it led us to how we connected with Ralph. And so we had customers asking we want to become more customer centric. We want to be known for our customer experience. How do we go there? And so Penn State connected us with their ISBM, which is their Institute for the Study of Business Markets. And so that place is built as the world's only B2B think tank. It's at Penn State. Their members include great marketing universities like Northwestern and Harvard and Georgetown and Emory. So all of that fits within this world. And as Ralph and I have talked a bunch of times, a lot of people think like B2B marketing and customer experience is a marketing thing. And Ralph's going to tell you his point of view, because he has an extremely well thought through and well developed point of view on this topic. But you're going to see that this is really everyone's job, improving the customer experience. And finally, just to put it into perspective for what we do at Corp.U and how we bring this to life, as many of you know, everything we do is built on taking people on guided, paced, cohort journeys, right? So we call that the guided learning journey, but it's a facilitated cohort session. And we have the platform. The content comes from all kinds of different academic partners like Penn State and others listed, and then the guided learning journey. And so we're excited to be launching with Ralph and with Penn State ISBM and with a handful of early adopter customers, a whole new program on customer experience journey. But without further ado, Ralph, I'd love to welcome you and see if you could tell us a little bit more about your background, EMM Group, ISBM. Welcome, Ralph.
Thank you very much, Alan, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I look forward to spending the next 45 minutes or so with you. As Alan said, my name is Ralph Cummins. I'm the Managing Director at EMM Group. And I'll start with our connection to ISBM and Penn State. EMM Group, ironically, was introduced to ISBM over a decade ago through several mutual clients. And we found ourselves working on similar programs, and we began to collaborate and started to work together to develop custom programs, usually in the area of marketing strategy best practices, being translated into curriculum and training for a variety of different customers, a couple of which are listed here on the page. So that's how we got to know ISBM, and over the years we've just developed a much tighter partnership, and today we are one of their thought leaders around their open workshop series, and that's what led us to work with Corp today. So we're very excited to be working with Corp and of course to continue our partnership with ISBM. I'll spare you the details on my background, and I come from I really think of myself first and foremost as a brand strategist, having come up through the agency world and through brand marketing. But I had an experience a few years back. I actually took a leave of absence from EMM Group because I really wanted to get more deeply into the technology side of marketing. And I went and ran a customer experience practice with an East Coast consulting firm called CapTech. And it had a really profound effect on me. As a brand strategist, I'd always thought of brands as being kind of the primary driver of value long-term in marketing. And one of the things that really struck me was the care and attention and the very disciplined and strategic approach that pure digital designers took to designing these digital experiences. And it really had a big effect on me, because at first I sort of felt like there was much ado about nothing, and then I finally sort of got it, which I realized was, if you're a pure play digital company, and I don't think many of the folks here on the phone are today, but if you are, the quality of that experience can be existential. It's not just a differentiating experience, but it actually could be the matter of whether or not you have a business. And that really struck me as I went back to EMM and started working with our customers again around different strategic issues. This idea that the customer experience as a driver of differentiation and as a driver of value was much greater than just, or shouldn't be limited to the digital world, but it's something that we should be adopting across the entire enterprise. Certainly something maybe we've done lip service to in the past, but it's always been kind of a difficult thing to do. But that experience is what led to developing this practice, and it's now become a main focus of EMM's group with our clients today. So that gives you a little bit of a connection, a little bit of background on me and how I got connected to this topic. And let's go forward, Alan.
All righty, let's go.
All right. So what I'd like to do today is, if you don't think so already, I'd like to try to convince you maybe a little bit that this idea of a holistic or an enterprise-wide customer experience really is, I like to say experience is everything, but that it really is a big deal if you don't think so already. But it's also worth doing, not as something we talk about from time to time, or something we ponder doing, or we look to one department or another to do, but something that we should do strategically across the company, but also recognizing that it's a growing challenge and it's something that we can all do. We can all probably do a better job. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody at any company that feels like they've truly cracked the code on this concept. So hopefully, we can give you some ideas to think about today to get you started on that journey. So we'll go to the next. So that I want to show some respect here for the pre-digital world. This idea of experience as a differentiator is not new. You have to look at Disney and think about how both first as a cartoon and a movie company, and then as a park operator, and now as a fully realized entertainment company with digital channels and everything in between, how they have always looked at the experience as the definer of their brand and value. So it's not an uncommon concept at all. It's been with us most of our lives. It's just not, it's always been seen as maybe a choice for certain customers and not something that should be a mandate or mandatory for everybody. But obviously a lot of things have changed during the digital revolution. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about that. So this idea of the experience, I ask this question a lot, is the world more experiential today than it was before or not? And I think most people actually do agree that it is more experiential simply because more people have the ability through digital channels and other channels to see more things and be open to more things. So if we turn the channel to bring this to a fine point, go to the next slide, please. Let's think about this idea of the post-digital world. I often get asked, by the way, I have some people still think that maybe we're still mainstreaming into the digital world, but I think we need to wrap our heads around the idea that we're really in a post-digital world now. A lot of the things that we think are changing have changed. The time has passed, and we're in whatever that next world is going to be. So for marketers, those changes, most of us feel them every day. I don't know that everybody thinks about them the same way I think about them, but time and distance used to be a marketer's friend. It allowed us to kind of dictate the terms of what we would do and when. Well, those days are gone. So we have no control over what people want and when they want it. So we need to be thinking about ourselves as always on and always available for consumers and customers when they need us. And we used to think about being very smart about who we target and having these very well thought out communication plans to persuade them. Well, those days are sort of gone too, because people are in different phases of the buying process at all times. And we really need to think about the idea that we have the opportunity to engage people and influence them, persuade perhaps, but certainly we want to think more about influencing them. And we've also, most of us have moved beyond the idea that we have products to sell, but really we have to super serve people. Yes, we have to have a great product, but we have to surround that with great services. And really, at the end of the day, we have to deliver a great, superior experience. Whether we say that or not, it's where we are as marketers, and we need to make that our main focus. Customers and consumers, they've changed as well in a lot of different ways. Yes, they're more tech savvy, and they probably have more control than before. And maybe they're a little bit more demanding and pushier, and why not? They have that ability. However, you also have to be very empathetic to the customer and the consumer today. People are overwhelmed by choices. Being in the digital world or the post-digital world hasn't necessarily made life easier for everybody. B2B buyers deal with more complexity than ever before and are often overwhelmed by it. So customers and consumers actually, in addition to being more in control, also are looking for more help from us, and that gives us an opportunity to serve them in new and different ways. So this idea of the post-digital world is something I think we all have to, many of you, I'm sure on the phone, are well beyond this, but I think other people are still thinking about how do I operate in this post-digital world. And my encouragement is let's move forward, because on the next slide, if we'll go to that, the Amazon effect. Well, not every business we deal with is affected by Amazon directly, but almost every business I know in some respects is affected by them indirectly, in that Amazon has changed consumer expectations about how we shop and how we buy through retail in ways more profound than most of us can express right now. And it's having a knock-on effect in other areas. People almost unconsciously are asking or expecting more across a wide variety of categories simply because what companies like Amazon and other companies like Amazon have done to change your expectations of what you can have and when you can have it. And Amazon's basically said you can have almost anything you want either today or tomorrow. And that is having a real profound effect, much broader than the people that they compete with directly. And I think it's something to think about as you start to think about the importance of your experience strategy, how even in unrelated industries, the expectations of your customers may be rising in ways you haven't even thought about or don't even understand yet because of the experience they're having in other areas. So if we go on to the next slide, it kind of leads us to this conclusion, this notion that experience is everything. So we live in this very fragmented world where people have more possibilities and choices than ever. There's more competition, and competition can find the markets a lot faster. Our customers, consumers, they expect us to be everywhere they want to be and to give them the same information. So this notion as the experience as being as important, the product, the service, the price of the brand, is something I think we all need to wrap our heads around. And depending on what research you look at, there's a lot of value in this. We've seen that, like in consumer markets, on average, what we see is that people that will pay anywhere from 15 to 20% price premium for what they believe is a better experience for the same type of product or service. And in B2B, on the B2B side, it's even higher. Our own research has shown that companies that are delivering a superior customer experience are often able to command 25, 30, even 40% price premiums with their B2B customers. Conversely, a bad experience maybe has a greater consequence than ever before. In a recent study that I'm going to show you some research a little bit later, a recent study, 1 in 3 consumers will walk away after a single bad experience, which is really chilling when you think about how much money it takes sometimes to win and to gain the loyalty of a consumer. So that's why we say experience is everything. I'm going to take some time now and take you through a couple of cases that we've been involved with. But before we do that, I think we have a polling question, Alan.
All right, let's get the poll, folks. Get ready to answer. How experienced is your company? So we're going to give you, everybody, if you could start voting. We're going to give you 30 seconds. Keep going, folks. Ten more seconds. Come on, get your last votes in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see the results. And Ralph, tell us what you think.
Well, that's I never know what to expect in these, but I would say that pattern. So it looks like we have probably a few that are a little bit more skepticism than optimism about the quality of the experience or the commitment to the experience among our participants today. I would actually say that this aligns with what we hear a lot, which is roughly 2/3 of the folks I talk to basically will say that while we may think it's important, we don't take this on strategically, and we don't have the commitment both at the leadership level or at the team level we need to really deliver a differentiated experience. So I would say our panel today is sort of in line with what we're seeing in general. We've had a couple groups that were a little more optimistic in this group, but we've had several that were quite a bit more pessimistic about their company's ability to deliver a strong customer experience. So I'd say on average, we're pretty average today. So room for growth and room for improvement. So maybe it's a good thing we're all here talking today.
Yeah. So here's a question, Ralph, just based on this, because I think, like, not sure and disagree. You're at a super majority right there. And my question is, I see a lot of our customers. They talk about customer centricity. They talk about obsessing. Amazon's mission, or whatever they call it, is to be the world's most customer-centric company. We see in supply chain, like Gartner, being customer-centric is like one of the most important things. And I wonder if you could connect, and so I'm using the term customer centricity or customer-centric there because it's so heavily used, but yet customer experience seems more in its infancy. And I'm just wondering if you could connect those two dots for us.
Well, I think that the idea of customer experience as a enterprise level activity is very much in its infancy. Again, outside of the pure play digital companies. And it's not because, I mean, you know, I've been talking to clients about being more customer centric since I think I got out of college. But it's not that people are blind to it or are, you know, or not aware that this is an opportunity, but it's, you know, we have to overcome, you know, decades or more of a legacy of doing business a certain way. So it's just simply not the easiest thing in the world to do. And in fact, I haven't worked on a customer experience strategy project that did not have a very strong change management component to it. In fact, I think it's sort of the ultimate change management activity if you really want to take this on. And that I can tell you that a number of customers we're working with today that are doing projects in this area really do see it as an opportunity for internal change as much as anything.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Good. Thanks.
All right.
Should we let's go back at it?
Yeah, and I thought I would just share a couple stories from my own experience that I thought people might find, you know, interesting. And what I really want to do is, you know, just the idea of, you know, taking this on can be kind of daunting and intimidating for folks because it does require a lot of change, but there's so much upside and value to it, and it can happen pretty quickly. So I want to just share a couple quick stories of companies that we've been involved with and some of the results they've had from taking on the customer experience. So the first one, if you go to the next slide, was one that I was involved in a very intimate way a few years back, and it was really the first time I think that me and my team had ever even used the words customer experience. But we were approached by a fairly good-sized coatings company, otherwise known as Paint. Actually, the CEO of this company propositioned me about this one day and asked me to come in and talk to him. And basically, his theory was he knew he was in a tough business because coatings are, by design, a very, very sophisticated commodity. If you're making, in this case, if you're making performance coatings for automobile OEMs, they want the colors across their different suppliers to be absolutely the same and completely replaceable, usually at around the same price. Yet, making, car paint in particular is extremely difficult. It's a highly, highly technical product, costs a lot to make, and yet it's commoditized by design. And so this particular CEO's idea was that to win long-term and to differentiate their company, they really need to look in other areas. And he saw the experience they delivered across all their different businesses as a potential opportunity to do that. And so he retained us to do a pilot program. And the first thing we did was we did a little bit of research with their existing customers. We knew they had a pretty strong net promoter score, but we really wanted to understand, what their customers valued. And if you go to the next slide, what really popped out here, and this was a hugely, hugely influential piece of research for this customer. It wasn't a customer journey map or anything like that, but we simply asked them a battery of questions about what were the things that were most important to them and making decisions about the suppliers they used. And frankly, how did the performance compare to the importance across their existing brands and suppliers? And what you will see, that what jumps off the chart here, is everything in yellow has nothing really to do with product. It has everything in the world to do with experience. And in fact, the highest rated factors and importance were more experiential types of attributes, and the biggest gaps were in this area too. So this study, very, very quickly convinced them that moving in this direction was the right thing to do to try to differentiate their brand and their company. And if you'll go to the next slide, it was I give the CEO the credit that this idea that customer experience could be a big differentiator for them. So in fact, we very innocently came up with a program for them that we actually called the Total Customer Experience Program, as corny as that sounded. But the idea was really to completely reorientate their client culture and to try to get all of their cross-functional groups to focus on the customer need and how they make decisions first and foremost to try to transform their business. And they had very lofty goals of this, and we piloted it in one business. And the remarkable thing about this program is the speed with which it had impact for them. If we go to the next slide. We went out and we looked at one business and did journey mapping across a large cross-section of their customers. You know, we knew going in that they already had good products and they had pretty good, strong sales and relationships management. But they also took kind of a one-size-fits-all to everything they did in terms of operations. So they were in a pretty good place to start with. But all customers sort of got the same treatment when it came to delivery and after-sales service and support. And in fact, they were quite proud of how they did that. But what was really interesting in the very first pilot we did, and when we dived into the customer journey and went beyond the obvious questions like, are you satisfied? But what can we do differently or better? We quickly identified a whole group of customers who said, well, you know, we like these guys, but we would pay more if we could get our product delivered earlier in more of a customized service experience. And so we quickly implemented a program across about 25% of their customers, which allowed them to capture a significant price premium simply by making some changes in their delivery policy and their operations team and how they treated these specific customers. It was not an easy thing to do because of some of the internal challenges to changing policies, but it was remarkable how fast we got to not only an insight on something that would fundamentally affect the satisfaction of these customers to the experience this client delivered, but actually that they could get more revenue from. And so to me, this was sort of a seminal moment going, wait a second, this is not just a great way to differentiate your brand. There's value in delivering this experience. And that's the thing that the sort of the upside and promise. Again, I would never guarantee that everybody will find something like this very quickly, but until you go out and do the hard work it takes to do this kind of work, you won't know what might be possible with some of your customers. So this is really a great story. I have another one I could share, Alan, as well.
Could we do a quick question?
Sure.
Let's just take one because this came in from Bettina. When starting to focus strategically on customer experience as a differentiation factor, how would you propose to design relevant lead KPIs to work with and follow internally?
That's a great question. It's not an uncommon question, and it's not an easy question, but there's an easy answer. It's not easy to do necessarily. But the key to doing, and we'll talk about this a little later, doing customer journey map, to doing this experience strategy work is to do customer journey mapping. And once you've defined the journey, once you've defined the key buying phases or the key consideration phases, and once you've defined what the customer needs to do at each point in the experience to move forward or to advance closer to you, then you can define the KPIs that you need to measure to understand that you are delivering at or above their expectation at that point in the experience. Some of the KPIs will be very obvious things that you're doing already, but often they'll be custom. The point is you need to figure out what the KPI is at each point of the experience, and then you need to figure out how you'll measure that. It's not that complicated to do. It's just you have to be very objective and open to letting the customer tell you how they measure success in the experience, because it's their experience. Once they do that, I know you'll figure out the right way to measure that. I hope that answers the question.
I think that was helpful. If we have any follow-on questions, please type them into the question box. Ready to move on, Ralph? Absolutely.
So I want to share another story. I particularly love this story. This is a company that I don't know how many people know of this company, but they're down in North Carolina, a great company, Parata. They make vial filling and pouch packaging solutions and all of the software and services that go with that for pharmacies. Very cool business, very advanced technology, but the machines are only about half their business. Service and maintaining those machines is the other half of the business. So it's not a sell it and forget it type of business. in order to be profitable and to do well, they have to develop good relationships with their customers over time, because it's about 50-50 in revenue. So it's sort of a razor blades and razors sort of business model. But the company's been around for a while. If you go to the next slide. And, in the first 10 years or so of their existence, they had a very spotty track record. I can share this with you, but the blue lines represent their financial results, and the black line represents the growth in employees. And you can see that those two didn't always go together quite as well as they would like. And, frankly, their net promoter score was okay, but it wasn't great. It was, sort of middle of the pack. And so they got to a point around 2014 where something needed to change. And if we go to the next slide, change came. Change is hard, but change is good. They went through a pretty significant workforce reduction and brought in a new leadership team, and had a bunch of unhappy employees and some customers that wondered if they were in it for the long haul. And in fact, the media was not betting on them. So it was a pretty tough time. And they sort of had to dig down and come up with a new path forward. And what I love about the Parata story, I mean, they had great products already, and they knew that they were doing a good thing. They just had to change the way they were doing business. And so they basically took on, without putting these words on it, because I know that these folks pretty well, they didn't say, we're going to go out and make customer experience our differentiator. They just did it instinctively and put the customer front and center and redesign the way they did business from the customer back. So if you go to the next slide, I can just give you kind of a high-level view of what they did. They went through their entire customer base to find all their customer segments, and there are about 6 major segments in their business. For each segment they went out and did an extensive mapping project on their buying journey, figured out all the high impact touch points, and then basically they put together a cross-functional team internally to rethink their entire approach for each of these customers across every touch point. And what I love about it is that everything they did in this work it wasn't marketing led necessarily. It was kind of a marketing driven idea, but it was cross-functional across the board. So they really blew up all of their silos, put together these cross-functional design teams, went through a really well thought out design process, did a lot of these interactive sessions with their team, and basically came up with a whole new way of dealing with their customers, including coming up with a new set of measurements to help them understand whether or not that they were what they were succeeding. And they did a lot of really interesting and creative things. We go to the next slide, please. I'll just show this to you. They not only did a really nice job in doing, this is a synthesis of one segment's buying journey, but they went through and they really found out which of the touch points made the biggest difference to the customers and that the customer valued the most. And they put a lot of emphasis around making those highlights of the experience that they delivered. If we keep going. When they did these interactive team sessions, which they've continued, by the way, they use this to redesign the experience for each of their 6 customer segments. Now what they do is when they win a new customer and sell a new machine, they actually create a custom cross-functional team for that customer, and that customer puts together a blueprint of the experience they're going to deliver to the customer. The team does, and they actually share it with the customers and say, here's how we're going to service you, and here's how we're going to work with you. And they get their feedback on it, which I think is a wonderful way of putting the customer first from the very beginning. But out of these design sessions, they came up with a whole new way of, it started with their people. What are the non-negotiable behaviors that they're going to have to deliver to customers, changed all their roles and job descriptions, rethought all of their processes so that they were kind of eliminate the silos by having all these cross-functional agreements, and created new ones as they needed. And they look for all these opportunities to wow their customers. And they document these things really well so they can repeat them. But one of the things, for instance, they learned early on is a personal thank you note to the CEO to a pharmacy that bought a new machine had a lot of impact. So now every new customer gets that personal thank you note. So they did a lot of cool things and a lot of small things, and did a great job documenting it so it could be repeated for every customer. So if we keep going here, what this has led to is this sort of new level, this new way of working with their customers, where from day one, they tell the customers how they're going to engage. They invite the customers to come to their new building if they want to, if they're interested in it. And they actually walk them through and show them their machines being built in real time. And has led to all these relationship building programs. And most of these ideas come from their customers. Everything from a get well program to struggling customers, to a loyalty program, to a influencer panel where they invite in their top 50 customers once a year. So what I like about their program is not only that it worked, but that it's really excited and engaged their internal employees, but it's also excited and engaged the customers. They essentially blew up this invisible wall between themselves and their customers, and designed a process that said, we're going to work together from the day that you choose us to be your partner. So it's a great story, and I think we have the results on the next slide. Yeah,
there they are.
So 2017 was actually the first year this was fully implemented. 2018, you can see they had a pretty good year. And in the first year, the first 12 months, they took their NPS score from 54 to 70, which says a lot about the impact this had on their customers. So I love telling this story because it was a very organic, internally driven story. Granted, it took a dark moment in their history to get it started, but they really got serious about putting the customers first, and it's driven just outsized results. So when you hear
Ralph,
yes.
I'm sorry, I wanted to cut in first of all just to say what a great story. But I have a couple questions.
Yes.
And I thought we'd before you transition to the next. You
Sure.
Go with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting. So John, question is, talk a little bit, if you would, about omni-channel sales approaches. Have you seen a high success rate with the strategy?
Omni-channel sales approaches, have I seen a high
Success rate?
Well, I mean, I would say on the consumer retail side, yes, because it's almost become kind of a technique-driven approach to sales. On the B2B customer side, I'm trying to think of I can't quote a statistic. What I'm seeing is when marketing and sales integrate around a customer experience-based approach, it allows marketing to play a much stronger and more supportive role for the sales team, so that the customers are getting what they need when they need it, and it allows the sales team to focus more on being that consultative selling resource to the customer, because they're not busy trying to get information or fill gaps that their customers need. So I think my answer to your question is yes, without reservation. But I hope that I got your question right.
All right. If we just take one more question. So this is from Jack. When dealing with procurement departments who attempt to commoditize any purchase, how does a seller transform the conversation from price to value?
I always get
you
this
like
question.
That one, huh?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good question, because the whole procurement, the procurement conundrum is a hard one to get around. We've done, I'm sure every consultancy out there is trying to do seminars and training on how you get around this. I mean, I don't have an easy answer for this, other than you've got to try to drive this greater sense of value at the at the highest level, and with the key decision makers at the customer, if you want to have any hope of winning with procurement. If you start with procurement, I think that gets they're typically not set up to have a conversation around this. So I think it is. I don't have an easy answer, other than focus with the audience that is receptive to this, and then hopefully you can leverage them to bring procurement along. But it is definitely a stumbling block for a lot of people, but it's not a reason to not do it.
Yeah, and I won't ask the audience on this one, because I'm certain on any given day with our webinars, we have lots of procurement people in the audience, so they're chuckling as they hear Jack's question.
Yeah, it's a toughie.
Yep.
So.
Okay, thanks. Other questions, folks? Please feed them in. Otherwise, Ralph, back to you.
Well, the one thing I would say to you, and I'll go back to the first case I showed to you, if you can quantify the incremental value you're delivering to a customer in the course of doing business, and quantification can be done a lot of different ways. If you can do that, you stand a better chance, right? Because then now you have a card on the table that you can take off if procurement, doesn't want to go along with the approach. So that's my
makes great sense.
Okay.
Quantify the incremental value.
So, so given all these trends towards a more experiential world and, the effect of Amazon and others and these two stories, you would think that everybody's, kind of killing it, right? That everybody's getting better and we're all getting our act together and getting more customer focused. I hope so, but I got to tell you, it's a steep climb. If we go to the next slide, I love this study from last year about the experience. This is with consumers across a bunch of categories. You can spend some time with this another time. This was a study published by PwC, which I'll give them credit for that. But basically what you see here is the red dots are the current level of satisfaction with the industry, and the black dots are the importance of a great experience. And basically what you see is a lot of gaps, starting with, not surprisingly, 33% at the top with the airline industry, healthcare coming after that, obviously facing high expectations, and then on down the line. The bottom line is, I looked at this, and my takeaway from this is it just shows how hard it is for us to keep up with consumer expectations. Consumer expectations, frankly, are rising faster than most companies can keep up with them, which is why I think it's so important to get very serious about this idea of getting focused on how to deliver a better customer experience. Because, for all I know, if we did this survey today, these gaps could be even bigger. This is on the consumer side. If we go to the next slide.
Hey, can I get a quick question in?
Yep.
Okay, so Rod wants to know, experience obviously needs to be cross-functional, but which function is best equipped to drive the strategy? Supply chain, sales, marketing, who typically does it, and does any group do it better than another?
Well, the problem with me, my opinion is this: is typically on a B2C business, marketing is typically taking the lead on this simply because they have more responsibility for consumer outcomes, and that makes sense. That my easy answer is the group or groups that are closest to the customer ought to lead, but not in a dictatorial way, because this needs to be everybody's business. I mean, in a complex B2B company, almost everybody touches a customer at some point. So it doesn't really do any good to have strong leadership if you don't have great cross-functional participation. But the easy answer is marketing on the B2C side. On the B2B side, I would say the commercial operations group, that could be sales, marketing, and others, tech service, other things that are dealing with customers already, so maybe they're a bit closer to the customer, so it makes sense that they would be responsible for getting the insights and the feedback. So, but ultimately, you got to make it cross-functional.
Well, that was what I was going to ask is, so if you're, there's on the commercial side, there's sales, there's marketing, on operations, you have supply chain across everything. Yep. Does it ever occur that it becomes a CEO initiative where it's cross-functional and they sort of create the environment that you just described?
Well, it is, and it has to be. But I can tell you that when these things fail, it's because they did not get the proper leadership to drive the cross-functional participation, and that is the crux of the issue. It's easy to blame cross-functional silos for this not going the way you want, but ultimately, if you want to drive this as a lever of change, leadership needs to sign up, and they need to enable people to change behaviors, change the way they do business, to work differently together and on behalf of customers, and that's a leadership issue.
Yep. I think that's a wise statement. All right, thanks.
I mean,
Back to.
I would go so. I know this sounds a little dramatic, but I would go so far to say, we're getting ready to kick one of these off for another customer, and we're the first month of this project is going to be working with their leaders, and we just said, look, we got to get all the leaders on board, and they've got to be committed and signed up to this, because it doesn't do any good to go down to the rest of the team and get them. They're going to be excited to do it, but it doesn't do any good to get them all excited if you're not going to support them. And you're not going to let them make decisions to do things differently. So you got to get the leadership on board. Anyway.
Yep.
All right.
Great. All right. Here we go.
So, I think it's understandable that consumer expectations are rising quicker than we can catch up with them. I thought this was an interesting study from Bain. Bain went out and talked to over 300 B2B customers about the experience they were receiving from their suppliers. And they then turned around and asked suppliers about the experience they were delivering to their customers. And so 8% of the customers said that they were receiving a superior experience, but 80% of the companies said that they were delivering a superior experience. So you had an 8 versus 80% experience gap between the companies and the companies that were serving them. So you make what you will of that, but that would suggest that there's plenty of room to win on the experience side as a B2B marketer, still to this day.
By a factor of 10.
That's a big misconnect right there. And I don't know if it's that dramatic across the board, but we do a lot of research and a lot of customer journey mapping and do a lot of the interviews with our customers, and there's definitely we hear about this gap all the time. So, all right. So it's kind of tough, and I just want to sort of summarize why it's sort of tough. I mean, there's any number of reasons, but first, a lot of companies are still differentiating between online and offline in marketing as though they're two different things, and that's created lots and lots of disconnects. And the customer or the consumer don't really care. They don't even distinguish between online and offline. They can't even remember anymore. So not having your groups integrated in the marketing function is kind of silly at this point. We've already talked about this a lot. The inability to overcome functional silos. Different functions driving their own metrics, whether or not they have anything to do with the customers. Complexity is a big part of it. It's ironic that the technology industry, has us all, lathered up about AI and all kinds of other complex technological concepts. And I think it's good to think ahead that way. But when you talk to consumers or customers, they really just want basic stuff. They want speed, convenience, they want access to knowledge, they want friendly people. In fact, consumers and customers in research overwhelmingly say the role of technology should be to connect me to your humans, right? Which leads me to my next point. Humans are still better than robots and will be for a long time, right? Engaged employees, I think, are the great cornerstone, and they won't be replaced by technology. Technology is the enabler of these great humans you have. And the last thing is, the old art of the war saying, tactical solution to the noise before defeat. I see a lot of people implementing point solutions that have never done any customer journey mapping. So what they might be doing might be a good idea, but there might be far simpler things they could have done to improve the journey for this customer had they bothered to take the time to find out. So to me, it really the call to action here is to back up and take this on as a strategic imperative. So, we used to think about the customer being wrapped by product and service, and then customer experience, and you need to have customer experience management around that. So I think it's a worthy effort and something worth considering. All right. So that I think we have another poll question here.
We do, and I had to put the poll question on the screen. So, folks, if you'll look at your screen, because in our poll, we're going to pop it up. Give me like 2 seconds. Our customer journeys are well documented. The key moments of truth are well known across non-digital and digital touch points, and our value proposition is well integrated into the experience we deliver. Fire up the poll. All right, folks, 30 seconds. Let's get those votes in. We're making progress. We're past 50%. Keep going, folks. Keep voting. This is how Ralph and I know we're keeping people awake. 5 more seconds. 2, 1. Okay. Here you go.
Okay, right. So a little more pessimism in this group around this question, I see. Not surprising. I'm going to guess the strongly disagrees on this were probably related to the idea of the value proposition not being integrated into the experience. You know, that's a concept. When I ask people about that, they look at me sometimes and think about it for a second and go, they look at me like, why are you asking me that question? And then I think they realize, like, why wouldn't the value proposition be integrated into our experience? To me, that's what the experience is all about. It's the customer's experience, but through that experience, they understand what your value proposition is. And that's the great, you know, to me, that's the great upside of doing this kind of, taking on this kind of endeavor. So that's not surprising based on your first answer, but I think I think I now better understand why you guys came to this seminar today, or this webinar.
Yeah.
So Alan, you know, I got a couple slides to wrap up. I know we're 7 minutes from the end here, and are there any
Keep
questions?
going. Yeah,
right.
we can. Let's bring it home.
Well, as you know, we have over the last several years, we've developed a whole practice, you know, a best practice approach to customer experience strategy, and that's what we've embedded into the Corp U course. But you know, I mean, a lot of this is intuitive. I think we know what a great customer experience would be. I mean, it would you would consistently meet or exceed their expectations. You find ways to surprise and delight your customers at key moments of truth. You deliver on your brand promise and reinforce your differentiation through the experience. Done correctly, you would make sure that you address all actors. That's always that's a tricky part of the work we do on this in this practice, and making sure that we've accounted for all the actors in the ecosystem and the various stakeholders and partners. And importantly, done right. I mean, it's kind of the way we used to talk about the brand back in the old days. The experience, no matter where they, you know, no matter where they encounter your company, would feel unified and well integrated. And that's not easy to do under any circumstance. And it's certainly not easy to do if digital and offline, you know, marketing or communicators or groups are not well integrated. But that's where you want to get to, because I think that's ultimately what your customers want from you. How do we do it? I think that's in our next slide, maybe. Somebody once asked, do you have a definition for this? So for what it's worth, this is our definition. An experience strategy is that collection of activities that an organization chooses to undertake, very important, chooses to undertake to deliver a series of positive and exceptional customer interactions, which, when taken as a whole, constitute a complete offering that is superior in some meaningful way, that is unique and distinct from competition, and designed to make customers happy at every touch point. And I want to emphasize that last point as what I think should be the goal when you start to think about customer experience strategy. You may not like the word happy. You might want to change that. But ultimately, I think that's really what we're talking about. We have a much more intimate relationship with our customers today through the many ways that we can market and be with them, through sales, through marketing, through operations, through supply chain. And it should be a happy occasion working together. So my big challenge with people is always, going back to the question about KPIs, think about KPIs that relate to happiness. And indeed, that's not an original thought. If you're familiar with the Google Heart framework, which is their open source framework for digital design, happiness is the ultimate metric. In other words, they make happiness the ultimate outcome they're trying to get with every experience. So that's my definition for experience strategy. You know, when the components of the strategy, I think, are on the next slide, Alan.
Yep.
Right. So the key elements that we cover in this are obviously segments and personas, journey mapping analysis. Journey mapping, I think, is the greatest differentiator or as a marketing practice or tool since segmentation. It's a wonderful practice. It's a wonderful tool. It can be used in so many ways. And it's the key thing that we teach on to get people to really think about the experience from the customer's perspective. Obviously, you have to be able to ideate against that journey map, and then put together a customer experience strategy is not something people are going to implement in 1 year. it's like anything else worth doing. It's going to take time. So you're going to have a strategy to implement over time based on your resources and ability to change the experience. Back to the KPIs, you got to have better and importantly linked metrics to know you're making progress. And the whole thing's going to work better if you put a change plan behind it. So we like to talk a lot about that. We have some great cases around change planning. So those are the key elements. And I think, yeah, so, you know, my last, to me, the big challenge here, above all else, is simply the complexity of dealing with the ecosystem of the customer and all the diversity of targets and stakeholders that most of your business have to deal with, which is why I say you got to have a strategy, because you got to have a way to prioritize and make sense of it. Because ultimately you're trying to take something that's very complex and make it a lot simpler and easier for your customers and for your internal teams. And that's not easy to do without a strategy and a plan. So I think that's it, Alan.
Well, there's your final,
Yep.
Which is why you say experience is everything.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to take that as our cue to wrap and just make one point. Next month, so September 19th, we have Bob Quinn from University of Michigan leading the purpose-driven organization. You see a little copy of his book right there. That book published yesterday, based on their cover story Harvard Business Review article that came out last summer on building the purpose-driven organization. So we're excited to have Bob with us. So please join us in September for another episode of Smarter Growth, Leadership Insights Rooted in Management Science. I want to say a major thank you to Ralph Cummins today. Ralph, thanks for your passion and your energy and your commitment to all the pain that is required to be on film and in the studio and doing all the work that you did to put so much effort into this program and to be with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yep. Thank you all. Make it a great day, everybody. With that, we're signing off.